We're going to kind of keep rolling with the career aspect and move right into Liz Delasobera's talk. She's the Chief Medical Officer for MedStar Ambulatory Services. She's board certified in emergency medicine and primary care sports medicine and practices primary care sports medicine at MedStar's Lafayette Center in Washington, D.C. She's a native of the D.C. area, completed her undergraduate degree at Yale in 2002, and was captain of the varsity tennis team. She received her medical degree from Stanford in 2008 and completed her residency in emergency medicine at MedStar in DC in 2011. She completed her primary care sports medicine fellowship in 2012 from VCU and then started the ER-based primary care sports medicine fellowship at MedStar Georgetown, which she ran and then has since handed over the reins to others on her faculty team. She's the lead primary care team physician for the Washington Capitals and has worked with Marymount University, Catholic University, and other pro college and club teams in the area. She's been named top doctors by Northern Virginia Magazine and Washingtonian many years in a row for her clinical work in primary care sports medicine. She's transitioned out of emergency medicine as she spends over 50% of her time in an admin role with MedStar, overseeing urgent care, radiology, ambulatory clinical space, as well as surgical and oncology centers. And she's also the director of the primary care sports medicine for MedStar's DC region.
Awesome.
Liz, go ahead.
Thanks, Ben. Can you see my slides?
Yep.
Perfect. Thanks for the intro. So this is also going to be kind of a non-academic, non-traditional lecture. I wanted to talk to you guys about kind of the alternative career paths beyond kind of EM sports to an admin role and how I got there. And I also wanted to talk about what it's been like to be a woman in the NHL. That was actually a topic that the NHL asked me to talk about. So tried to morph this talk into two different things that we could talk about today. So first thing, we'll just kind of go through how I got to where I am, combo of EM sports, and then to the admin role that I'm in. We'll talk more about the NHL, like I mentioned, in particular, what it's been like to be a female in that world, which traditionally has been mostly male dominated, and then go through a bunch of leadership lessons learned. These are kind of tips and tricks that I often give our fellows, and have gotten good feedback about these tips and tricks. And so I thought I would pass them along to this group as well. So from a life career perspective, when I was asked by the NHL to talk about what it's been like to be a female in the NHL, it actually made me think, like, I haven't even ever thought about it. And the reason I don't think I'd ever thought about it is because this is kind of how I grew up. Playing baseball on a boys' team, playing soccer on a boys' team, being in a jazz band with all boys. Those are my friends at graduation. That was kind of my group of friends. So I tended to just be surrounded by boys growing up. And so while at one point I was the only female team physician, there were some other females, but in kind of that lead role, I don't think I ever really noticed it. The only time you really notice it is that there's no line for the women's bathroom often in many of these meetings. But otherwise, I didn't really notice it. So it was hard for me to give a talk about what it's been like. I'm going to give you a little bit more background about me because it kind of paints the leadership role I went into. So I went to Yale and I played tennis, and sports were a key part of my life growing up. And one of the reasons I chose sports medicine was because I loved my team physician at Yale. I had a lot of injuries and I spent a lot of time with him, and he always helped me get back on the court and stay healthy, but stay safe. And so I thought that was the coolest job ever. It was also the first time I was in a leadership role, being captain of the tennis team and then also being on student council at Yale. And I think in those leadership moments is when I realized I really liked leading people. And so college shaped my career. I knew I wanted to go into medicine even in high school, but going into sports medicine was something I realized in college. And then I knew I wanted to have some sort of leadership role because I really enjoyed those in college as well. I went to Stanford for med school from the DC area, but went out west. Really enjoyed that. And another kind of career shaping moment, I realized that you could do ER and sports medicine there. There were some other ER sports med docs at Stanford in addition to PM&R sports. And so did some rotations where I was experiencing primary care sports medicine, and that opened up doors for me. I realized in medical school, I didn't like the operating room, and I wanted to do sports medicine, but I didn't like the operating room and I didn't know what to do. And it was great that I was introduced to primary care sports, and in particular ER sports, at that point in my med school career. I came back to DC and did my residency at Georgetown in Washington Hospital Center in emergency medicine, knowing they didn't have a sports program, but wanted to come back to DC. I continued to want to go into primary care sports, but unfortunately back then there were only 4 ER sports fellowships in the country, and none of them were anywhere close to where I was living. I had my son in residency. I wanted to stay in DC. So I decided to do a rotation at VCU, which was in Northern Virginia in the DC area, in their family medicine sports fellowship. Loved the faculty there, decided to, luckily I matched there so I could stay in the area. I was the first non-EM person they took. And while it was fantastic from a learning perspective, I felt like a fish out of water. I didn't feel like they understood my brain. They didn't know what I had learned in residency. And there were a lot of things I was missing from a continuity primary care perspective that they took for granted. And there were a lot of things I knew that I didn't need to be taught when it came to sideline medicine. So I felt like I didn't want others to have this experience, and I wanted to create a bigger body of training for EM physicians to learn sports. So within that, just after that year of fellowship, came back to MedStar Georgetown and decided I would be EM faculty and I would dabble in sports clinical medicine. They gave me like a half day a week of clinic, but I was really going to start a fellowship so I could start to train others. And that kind of has been a career that has just opened up a ton of doors for me. So started the fellowship. Corey Hudson, who spoke earlier, who I think is speaking later, was my first fellow. She was my faculty as a resident, so we flipped roles, which was interesting and fun. And since then, we've grown the fellowship from 1 to 2 fellows, and I think, I don't know how many years, over a decade of fellows, and I think most are on this call when I look at the names. So we've trained, 20 plus EM sports physicians, and we continue to train them, and it's been a really fun road. Corey is now the fellowship director, and we have lots of our graduates on our faculty group. In the last 10 years, I have migrated out of academics and out of clinical EM into more of a administrative role. So first, during that time, became the head team physician for the Capitals, and that has been a lot of fun. I'll get into that more. I did an MHA with Wharton through MedStar. It was a program that MedStar offered to me that was a kind of a 2-year longitudinal program. And that opened up a lot of doors for me as well and taught me a lot about the business of medicine. And I got really excited about that. In 2018, I was asked by MedStar to oversee all of our urgent cares and be the medical director. At that point, there were 14 urgent cares and there was no COVID. We now have 34 urgent cares. We went from 150,000 visits a year to 650,000 visits a year. So grew really, really rapidly. And so I learned, like, by jumping in the deep end, how to oversee a part of a healthcare system, in particular during a pandemic. And during that time, I had started with 100 APPs and physicians that reported up to me, now up to 300. Urgent care is under the ambulatory umbrella for MedStar. And within the last 2 years, I got the role of chief medical officer for all of ambulatory, which, as Ben mentioned in the intro, has ambulatory surgery, it has radiology, oncology, all of our big ambulatory care centers that have sports medicine in them. And so there's lots of things kind of under that umbrella that I oversee. And luckily, I have a million wonderful people on my team that help me do that. So I'm going to dive a little deeper into the NHL, and then I'm going to give you guys a little bit of lessons learned as to kind of how I got into this leadership position and what I think's helped me to get there. So from an NHL perspective, I started off as an airway doc for the Caps when that first year when they required it. I was the first ER doc on the side of the ice for a game. I think it was 2013. And really, they say, just don't be noticed and just be there if we need you. And you didn't feel like you had a role with the team at first. But gradually, I think I got more and more integrated. I think you just have to be willing to fill whatever role is needed. Whenever something is asked, whether it's a project, a committee, a meeting, just be willing to do it because it can open up doors for you. Being available is key. And so as I kind of moved into bigger roles, make sure that you're available for wives and kids and parents and families and visiting family members, et cetera, because players and staff really care about their family's well-being, and they're on the road a ton. And so being available for all of them at all times, while it's a lot to take on, it means that you're going to be successful with that team. Also, obviously, be available for your athletic trainers. Your athletic trainers are your biggest asset. And so, for those that are new into sports medicine or training, you have to have a ton of respect for your athletic trainers and you have to be a great partner to them. Same thing goes with coaches, always be available for them. And then visiting teams. I mean, our visiting teams often don't have any knowledge of the local healthcare system. And so being available for them is really important. You can see in this picture when we won the Stanley Cup, this is on the ice in Vegas in 2018. That kind of represents the concept of being invisible, but also being present. So really trying to be a fly on the wall, but making sure you're always listening and there when they need you, but don't get in the way and engage when needed. And in particular, as a female in a male locker room, I think that's extremely important. But I think in general, that's one of the keys to being a successful sports physician is to learn that balance. Being organized and reliable. So be ahead of your athletic trainers with managing your notes and whatever process you have as a team to manage your meds and reconcile them, to review labs and, be organized for your physicals and have everything ready to go. Make sure your players have closed loop communication with you about any pending results. And so make sure you follow through with everything. And know your policies and procedures. You're supposed to be the expert of everything medical on that team. And so even if your handbook is 100 pages, make sure you read it and make sure you know the details. The NHL asked me when I gave this talk, what are the challenges you've had? And I, like I said, I hadn't really thought about what's difficult about being a woman in the NHL, but I'd say, sometimes the GU complaints can be challenging, maybe at first in particular, but I feel like I've gotten used to that. I have great relationships with all the wives of our players. They call me routinely and text me and know I'm available, but they also then want to be your friend. And so I've learned that there's really important work-life boundaries. It would be really fun to go out with all the NHL players' wives to these fancy restaurants, but I always say no because it's important to have those boundaries. I think that locker room privacy, oftentimes the players walk around in towels, etc. And so just trying to be that fly on the wall is important. So that way, you don't feel awkward and they don't. Anna talked about work-life balance, and I don't even think those things exist. But obviously, if you're available to everybody, sometimes that means that your phone goes off at the wrong times and the times that aren't best for your family. So always something that's a challenge. And the wrong sized is just funny because every time we go to an away game or a tournament, they always give you a bag of gear. And it's always wrong sized. I mean, they never have female sizes. So I have a lot of caps gear that goes to my son and my husband. All right, I'm going to go through some lessons learned, just what I learned from my own mistakes or what I felt like has helped me become successful from a leadership administrative perspective. And these are in no particular order. These are things that I've just kind of accumulated over time. Always arriving early to anything. I think if you're on time, you're late. And so making people wait for you in meetings or shifts at sign out or clinic. If you're going to be late, which happens periodically, just communicate it in advance. Send a text, put something in a chat or whatever so people know, but really try to be on time. I block 4 to 5 p.m. every Friday on my schedule to look at my next week because I think it's really important that you're productive in any meetings or anything you have coming up. So for me, I now am 50% or more administrative. I have quite a bit of meetings, and I hate when meetings are a waste of time. So I look at all my meetings and I think, what sort of agenda do I need to set? What questions do I need to prepare ahead of time? Do I have all the right people in the meeting? Do I even need to have this meeting? Is it not necessary because we've already talked about it? So I spend time the week before preparing for the next week. Don't feel like you always have to have an answer. That's something I learned early on. Like I always felt like I needed to be able to answer anybody's question and have the answer. I'm now very comfortable saying, I don't know, but I'll find out. And I think that's a really important lesson to learn. Being self-deprecating, when you make a mistake, say it, be humble, laugh about your mistakes, tell others about them because it will make you seem human. And probably a lot of you, because you love sports, have seen the Duke women's basketball coach YouTube video about do hard better. Don't just wait for work or life to get easier. That was really important in COVID. I think when everyone was working so hard and you kept just saying, this is going to end, this is going to end. Don't just wait for things to get easier because they always just get harder, right? So just prepare yourself for that and like grab the bull by the horns and be okay with doing things that are hard. Try to always be a few steps ahead, like I said, sorry, and prepare ahead of time. And sometimes think about what could go wrong. Hope for the best, but prepare for the worst. Always have a backup plan or someone that you can count on. So there's many people on this call that are kind of work buddies for me. And so if I've got something that comes up, I've got a type 1 diabetic kid, if she's in the hospital, or if something comes up, I always know I have someone that can fill in for me. So, and that goes with the third bullet, build a great team. I mean, you need to have lots of people on the bench, and you can be on the bench for them and they can be on the bench for you. The next one goes with this too. I used to try to do everything myself, and I realized that it's not possible, and you won't do anything well if you try to do too many things. So as you build a really big team, you'll have the ability to delegate. And some of the more junior folks on your team will be really excited about a project because it helps them grow. Say thank you to everybody. So, when you walk into a shift, or walk out of a shift, say thank you to the front desk, say thank you to the janitor. Those things make a huge difference. And we already talked a little bit about this, but when you make a mistake, own it so you can learn from it the next time. Not just the thank yous, but become friends with everybody. So the people at the front desk, the security officer at the office, whoever it may be, those people, it's really good to be friends with everybody. You never know when they're going to help you or you can help them. And going with that, if you're going to go get coffee, a snack, or lunch, ask everybody around you if they need anything. And it's going to be money well spent. They almost always say no, but they're going to appreciate that you asked. I'd say this third one is probably one of the most important things to me. Never ask someone to do something you aren't willing to do yourself. So while I do delegate or ask people to help with projects or various tasks, I never delegate something that I would have hated to do myself or I wouldn't have done myself or haven't already done before. Because people need to see that you're willing to do everything if you're going to ask them to do it too. Giving credit where credit's due. So as you delegate, more people are going to send things to you that they've done. And if you present it as your work, that's awful. So elevating someone else, making sure that they get credit, that's really important. I've had a coach for a while because when you have 300 people that report to you, you have a lot of difficult conversations. So whether it's firing somebody, performance improvement plans, etc. So I practice a lot of those with my coach ahead of time. And a shared visioning approach is something that she really advocates for. Figuring out where you and that other person can see eye to eye, especially when you're working on some performance improvements, really helps. And then you can kind of use that as a starting point of the conversation. If you can do something quickly, don't offload that. So the delegation piece, yes, it's important, but if you can just do it yourself within the 5 minutes that you could tell them to do it, just do it. Try to only delegate some of the bigger, more important things that they would benefit from. I always tell my team, if you come to me with a problem, which I always want to know about a problem, I need 3 proposed solutions. The third one can be ridiculous, but think about 1 or 2 at least that are tangible and that you've thought of. Because if you just come with a problem without a solution, you actually haven't thought through anything. I always end every meeting by asking, is there anything I can do to help you? Because the reality is that's my goal. Everyone that I work with, I want to help. And so I really want to make sure I'm opening up that discussion. I always read important emails out loud before I send them, especially long ones. So I think that's a good practice. And then get to know the team you work with personally. And this is an example. So we do these bios, and this is mine. These are all the pictures of my life. You can see a Stanley Cup ring on my son. You can see my daughter in the ICU when she was diagnosed with diabetes. You can see lots of different things on here. My brother passed away. There's pictures of him. So I got vulnerable with my team. I talked about all the things in my life that were good, bad, and in between. So they know about me. And then they all do these too. And so when you get to know people, you work so much better with them. A few clinical lessons learned. I find that many times when patients have a chronic condition, I find like a lot of trainees in particular, they'll roll their eyes and they'll just say, I don't know, kind of the person's crazy. Every once in a while, that's the truth, but oftentimes it's just we haven't figured it out. So Believe in your patients, believe there's something wrong. Don't just take it for granted. Don't roll your eyes, and let's try to figure it out. And if you find yourself judging a patient and say, like, kind of talking about how they're annoying or something like that, think about how much more difficult it is to be in their shoes, living with that chronic condition, and really try to listen and have empathy. In some of the complex patients, hospital, ED, etc., when you're feeling puzzled or stuck, I feel like always go back to the bedside and talk to the patient. It will usually give you the answer. I find we're often just sitting in front of the computer, like looking at numbers and trying to figure things out, but oftentimes the patient has the answer. So go talk to them. I tell all of our urgent care providers that one of the most powerful things we do is educate and navigate. We don't have to solve every problem. We don't have to have every answer. We don't have to make every single diagnosis, and we don't have to do the eventual treatment for that diagnosis, but we can educate patients and navigate them to the right place. And if a patient asks for a second opinion, or maybe even you are recommending a second opinion, that can really go a long way. And so I've had CAPS players, I've had other athletes, and I really embrace and advocate for second opinions. Because I never see it as a sign of that I couldn't figure it out. I just see it as adding someone else to the team. I have a couple of weird isms or rules that I think have helped me in order to stay organized. So I never start another ER or urgent care shift or clinic day without having the notes complete from the prior clinical day. So that's my own internal rule. I just won't. So if I have to get up at 5 a.m. to do my notes, I'll do that. But I just don't start the next day without finishing the notes from the prior clinical day. I also do the same with my inbox for my EMR. That takes priority over my email inbox, and my work email takes priority over my personal email. So there's kind of a triage system. But that inbox, my EMR inbox, I never can leave the day without finishing that. I have a no inbox policy. So generally, every email before I go to bed is either flagged, filed, deleted, or responded to. So my work inbox right now, I mean, during this talk, it might have added, but before I got on it, it had only three emails in the inbox. And so I try to end each day with having basically dispositioned each email. Of course, if I go to sleep, more will come and I'll deal with it in the morning, but that's the way I stay organized. And my personal isn't quite as good. That's my last one, but it tends to have about 10 in it. And it's kind of usually things that aren't pressing. I also think closing the loop with referring physicians, PCPs, et cetera, goes a really long way. And calling another team physician when you're seeing their athlete, like I know every team physician in the NHL, and I have them all, I have all their cell phones, and it goes a long way. And they call you back when your athlete is at their shop too. So it really makes a huge difference. We talked about the empty inbox policy. If there's a quick response, it's all that's needed. Just do that quickly because you don't have to think about it again. Every time you have to go back and read the email for your quick response, you've wasted time. Closed loop communication is always so important. Never respond when you're angry. I think you guys all know that. So that's the email that I flag. I think about, I read my response out loud. Sometimes I run it by somebody else. Having that work buddy to run things by is super helpful in those moments. And time your sends. I love now that you can time your text sends as well, but I've always timed my email sends because, you know, I may wake up at 5 a.m. to do my inbox, but a lot of people don't. And especially as ER physicians, we have lots of weird hours. So you can always just time your send to be at 8 a.m. the next day. And that's a reasonable time for everybody. I make to-do lists that I won't lose by emailing them to myself. Everyone has their own thing. My son has a note card and he loses his note card, so I don't recommend that. I recommend emailing it to yourself or putting it on your notes in your phone, something you're not going to lose. You're not going to lose your email. You're not going to lose your phone usually. We talked about how I block time. I block time for notes before clinical days. I block time to look at my calendar on Fridays, etc. I think you just have to schedule some of that block time to make sure you do it. And make sure your down moments are productive. So I often, if I'm going to be in the car driving somewhere and I can do a meeting by phone, I'll flip it to the car ride. So that way you can be productive in that car ride. And exercise pays it forward. I think as sports physicians, we all have to know the benefit of that. When people say I don't have time to exercise, I always try to explain to them the research that shows that your brain moves better and faster when you do exercise. And so you gain that time back and then some. So I think we all have to know that as sports physicians. So we made it through kind of the three parts of my talk. I'll just end with this. I mean, as you can see, I think I really advocate hard work. I think it opens up a lot of doors. It gets you a lot of places, whether it's being available, being organized, being thorough. But hard work beats talent when talent doesn't work hard. And I don't feel like I was built to be the best leader. I never thought of myself as someone that was going to lead 300 people, but I think I've learned how to do it by working hard, and I think all of you could do the same. So I'm happy to open it up to questions.
Any questions before we move on? Thank you for those clinical pearls. I really enjoyed those last few slides.
Yeah.
Yeah, I will say, so Liz, obviously based on how she did her talk, you won't be surprised, but when I asked the speakers for their slides, she sent them back the next day. This was months ago. And I read through them, and it actually really helped me in organizing this conference and reminding me of things I needed to do and the approach I needed to take just in trying to get this whole thing together. So thank you for that, Liz.
Yeah.
Really
First
helpful.
time.
This is a
Yeah, and
great.
congrats to you for organizing this. I mean, I think it's an awesome leadership moment for you. You've done a fantastic job, and it's great to see so many faces that either applied to our fellowship program or were in our fellowship program. It's a really cool group. So thanks for doing this.